Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I'm your host, Ali, the manager at Enlighteens Education. Gaining admissions to elite colleges and universities is increasingly challenging nowadays. Surprisingly, the results of Asian American students from the best UC feeder high schools has been dropped significantly as well this year. Tonight, I have our senior consultant, Daniel, to give us in-depth analysis of how Asian Americans can stand out despite admissions bias. Before we start the webinar, please let me introduce a little bit about Enlighteens and what we do. We are a group of educators who have many years of experience in college admissions consulting and working with families in the Bay Area and beyond. Enlighteens Education offers personalized college planning services and strengths-based mentoring approach to identify each student's character, interest, strengths, opportunities, and discover the unique education path to realize their long-term goals. This includes guiding families through the confusing college applications process, course selection, extracurricular activities, summer planning, and test prep. Our offices in Cupertino and Pleasanton are home to our full-time consultants and support staffs with an average of 8 years of experience. Our years of teamwork also let us offer stability and a high level of synergy. There are two parts of tonight's webinar. First part is Daniel's presentation. The second part is Q&A. All right, now let me give the stage to Daniel and get started.
All right, thanks very much, Ali. All right, so yes, welcome everyone. Thanks for taking some time to join us tonight, and let's talk about the topic for this week. So yes, my name is Daniel, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this page, more than usual, because I think it's extremely relevant, as you can tell from the first couple of slides and from my picture. Yes, I am also Asian American, and I went to Lynbrook High School. So if you're familiar with that, that is in the South Bay in San Jose, West San Jose near Cupertino, and it's it has quite a reputation for academically challenging, competitive school with, I believe it's 70 or 75% Asian now. So yes, this is a high Asian American population there. So a couple of things that, during my time and what I got away from my time at Lynbrook, I'm not trying to brag here. I'm showing you the diversity in terms of my extracurriculars and what I was involved in during my time at Lynbrook. Eventually, I did become senior class president. Before that, I was also a junior class officer. I was a peer counselor my 10th grade. I did link crew for 11th and 12th grade. I did marching band in 9th grade, football 10th grade. I also worked at AMC Theater, so I had work experience during the summer. In senior year, I volunteered as outdoor education, science camp, Santa Cruz OES. I did that for a whole week. During my free time, I would go to Second Harvest Food Bank with friends, also the San Jose Family Shelter. So I would volunteer, I would get involved. And then for my efforts, I suppose you could say, I did win the Fremont Union High School District Foundation Award that they award to one student per year from each high school in the district. I also got the Alumni Association Award. There were 2 seniors chosen for that. And I got the California Legislative Assembly Award and a governor's scholarship. That's just, from high school. And this is highly relevant to what I want to talk about today in terms of how to stand out, right? And we'll talk more about the Asian American part. We'll talk more about race, but I have a lot of statistics. I have a lot of information that I want to share with you so that we can better understand what it really means to stand out. After high school, I went to UC Irvine. And then before my second year of college, I volunteered overseas to teach English in China, Southern China, and I really enjoyed it. And I realized that I love helping people. I've always helped people throughout my entire life, and I've always enjoyed teaching and helping people learn to do things. And I decided, I want to teach. I want to teach English. And after that, I came back to the Bay Area and I got my master's in TESOL. And now I am an instructor at De Anza College, where I teach ESL, ELD, and here at Enlighteens, I also help teach, SAT, ACT, TOEFL, as well as ESL students. And that means I specialize in grammar and writing, especially in high school and college essays and personal statements. And I can tell you from my writing experience, English background, right, like we really don't learn how to do this in high school. We really don't know how to write a strong personal statement as a teenager. We don't really know how to talk about ourselves that way, right? It's really more like a job interview, work interview. And teenagers, unfortunately, just, usually don't have that kind of experience or wisdom in terms of what to talk about and how to talk about themselves. All right. So yeah, I'll talk about that in today's topic as well. So here is our agenda. I'm going to start us off with the weekly news update, give you some updates on the Ivy League admissions that was released this past week, the current climate and how we got to our current climate in terms of Asian Americans in post-secondary education, challenges for Asian Americans because of ethnic diversity in colleges. And then the last point is, techniques and how to really kind of stand out more. All right, so weekly news update. You probably heard this past week, all over the news, all the Ivy League schools saw much, much lower admit rates this year compared to last year, and they also saw a lot more applications. A couple of reasons for this. There was a gap year last year for a lot of students thinking about taking a gap year because of COVID. We also saw just a lot more applications across the board to all schools, both public and private, because of the recent announcements of a lot of schools going test optional or just getting rid of tests like the UCs have, partly because of COVID and just also these other interruptions to traditional high school curriculum. So we can see with alphabetical order here, the Ivy League schools ranging right from 5.6 to 8.8%, 4.9% from 2020, down to as low as 3.4, 3.5, right? Most of them in the 4s and 5s. Columbia down to 3.7, so 3.7 from a 6.1. Yeah, we can see there just a large increase in applications. So yes, we can start to think about the admit rate is lower, but we also always have to keep in mind the sample size, right? We did see more applications at these schools. So we have to think more about what kind of students were they admitting and, where, how, why, all these kind of questions. But overall, applications were elevated at brand name schools, but were flat or down at many lesser known institutions. If you follow with our blog, that's a great resource for us to keep up with. We talked about how there are some colleges that are losing enrollment, and some colleges are even closing down. We even have a Mills in Oakland has announced that they're closing. So basically, the rich are getting richer. A lot of other schools are struggling as a result. A severe separation possibility from the sub-elite and everybody else. Right? It's kind of a popularity contest at this point. We know all these great names for these great schools. Right? Everybody wants that. Acceptance rates can continue to shift as schools turn to their wait lists. Right? You hear from friends and family, so many students got waitlisted this year to round out their classes. Last year, many selective schools dug unusually deep into their wait lists because so many students decided to take a gap year. Right? Common consensus and belief is that wait lists were overutilized last year. Possibly that this year could be the opposite then. Okay, so current climate. Right? So how do we get here then? Topic is how to stand out as Asian American. So I'm going to focus on Asian American population, first of all, in the US. In 2000, about 10 million. By 2017, almost double, 19 million. We had the .com, we had the internet, we had this bubble, this growth, tech, Silicon Valley, all that, 80s, 90s really, right? 90s and 2000s. A lot of immigrants. So there was a lot of educated immigrants, Asians that came to California mainly, but America. But we see this spike, this increase in Asian American population. U.S. college enrolled Asian Americans. If we look at the same time period, 1.1 million in 2000, and then up to a 1.5 million by 2017. So yeah, we saw this 90% increase in population, but only a 36% increase in U.S. college enrolled Asian Americans. Now, international students, right now we are about 1 million, and with about 70% of them from Asia alone. So in terms of standing out as an Asian American, we have to think about these numbers. We have to think about all these statistics. And a lot of schools, as you probably heard, and that schools also are looking for international students, and they also count for their on-campus demographics, right? So that's something also to keep in mind. If we have 70% of international students are Asian, that's kind of something that you have to keep in mind as well. Now, if we look at these, we're going to look at Ivy League schools first, but Ivy League / elite private schools. If we look at the breakdown of their demographics of 2020, Harvard, 44% white, 17% Asian. UPenn, about the same, 19% Asian. Dartmouth, 50% white, 15% Asian. Yale, 46% white, 17% Asian. Princeton, 42 versus 20. Brown, 42 versus 14. Then we have Cornell, white 39, Asian 18, Columbia 55, Asian 14. Right? So if we look at those 8 Ivy League schools, you're going to see about, kind of an average here. Couple of things to keep in mind, of course, there are legacy, there's a history there. There are, all these things to keep in mind if they're keeping this sort of diversity that they've known for a long time. On one hand, right, if we think optimistically, just positively, like that's actually not bad, maybe, right, compared to the percentage of Asians just in America in general. So like maybe that's not that bad. But if we look at something like Stanford, not an Ivy League school, still an elite private school, but it's located in Bay Area, right, in California, where it's we can see, right, there's a lot of Asian Americans in the Bay Area. It's still about 36% white, 21% Asian. So it kind of matches, right, the Ivy League demographics. So I just wanted to keep, show this so that you have this kind of perspective here, because when we look at elite private schools that focus on legacy and reward legacy, there's more than just, ethnicity at play here. We have to think about just contextually the historical context of legacy and what that means in terms of, what kind of students, what was the demographic in terms of legacy. Now, I'm not saying that, this percentage, all these percentages, everyone's legacy, but that is something to keep in mind. Now, when we shift our focus over to something like public schools, UC Berkeley, again, if we look at the statistics, so UC Berkeley in California, now California, keep in mind, 15.5% Asian, 71% white, 39% Hispanic Latino, right? So of course, the overall majority in all of California is still white, it's 71% white, but Asians are the largest group at UC Berkeley at 35%, 35%. Okay, white 26, Hispanic Latino 15. Now, University of Michigan, also a public school, Michigan is 79% white, 3.4 only, 3.4% Asian. And the makeup, the demographic at their school, white 61, Asian 14. Right, so maybe not that bad. Again, we're looking at public schools that are designed because, first of all, we have to think statistics in terms of finance. Where do they get most of their money from, right? Funding. They're publicly funded schools. They're going to get their money from the government. These publicly funded, institutions and programs are supposed to help the public. So you heard the news, you saw the news about how UCs are, trying to help, especially target Hispanic, Latino communities, Black communities, underrepresented communities. And it kind of makes sense, right? It is a public service, public good here. Our tax dollars are paying for the public schools. But at the same time, right, we have to keep in mind, wait, UC Berkeley, 35% Asian, while California is only 15.5%. This is not so bad, actually, right? When we start thinking about it like that. So I just wanted to make us think about it from both sides. Yes, it's not, maybe it's not even right. It's not even fair to be, dividing people by race, right? That's definitely on the table. That's one discussion. But at the same time, like, okay, trying to promote diversity, like this is a very, very difficult conversation for everyone to have, right? Everyone has different opinions and beliefs and from different sides about this. But just statistically speaking, like, this is what it is. California is 15.5, while UC Berkeley is 35. Okay. Now understand the climate. How do we get here? Right. Now I want to show one more thing before I have some statistics about Asian Americans in terms of before college. A lot of statistics about that. But one more thing to show us here. 2015, the Stanford CS department, there was a study in 2015 and then it got updated several years later. 707 students in the Stanford CS department, and 70% basically, 69.7% men, 30% women. If we break it down, 46% Asian, 38% white, 9.5% Latinx, Latina, and 6.1% Black. Now the person who was running this research, right, he went back and updated it 5 years later, 2020. Now, this Stanford CS department had grown in size, 944 students now, and now it was 65.5% men and 34.4% women. So you can already see some changes in numbers here. About 37% Asian, 34% white, and then about 9.6% Latinx and 5.6% Black. So if we look at the changes, we saw an increase in percentage of women. If we think back the past 5 years, kind of makes sense. Just for a lot of purposes, for a lot of reasons. I mean, we've seen more women get into CS. It's been a little bit more encouraged as well, and we're seeing more widespread curriculum. Keep in mind also 2015 means these students were in high school the 4 years before that. So we're really thinking about the 2011 to 2014, 2015 cohort of high school students, right? So the climate in our culture, our society has definitely changed as well in terms of how much emphasis we place on CS and, how much we encourage this to our both genders. So 4.4%, right? And minus 4.4% men, minus 9.5% Asian, minus 4.4% white. Okay, and then plus 1% Latinx, minus 0.5% black. So we've got minuses, basically minuses, right? Only plus 0.1%. So yeah, we're seeing more diversity in the other groups of ethnicities not listed here. Okay, so we've got more representation, more diversity, and that is something that we will see and continue to see in both private and public schools. You also saw, I think it was this week, it was USC. USC posted the news that this is one of the most diverse classes that they've had, this incoming freshmen, especially first generation students. I think it was 1 in 4, 1 in 5, something like that. So you can check the news on that. All right, so there's definitely a trend, and that kind of supports the whole test optional movement as well. So there are a lot of there's a lot of positive upward movement for first generation college students. So that is a big plus here. All right, so challenges for Asian Americans. We know that there are high expectations. There are definitely high expectations for Asian Americans. If we just look at average SAT scores by race and ethnicity in 2015, right, Asian Americans scored on average higher SAT scores. You can take a look at this list for a while if you like, but it's basically Asian Americans and whites that are in the 500s, right? Not trying to say anything about any type of group here. These are just the numbers here, but we have to think about when our students, especially Asian American students, are applying for college, what does it mean? We hear time and time again, colleges compare you to your high school peers, compare you to your city, your state, right, your locality. So we have to think about, well, we're not competing with other people across the country or across the world necessarily. The first people that we're competing with actually are classmates, our peers. So high expectations. Asian American students on average, to score 300 points higher on the SAT. This is one of the results of just being very academically competitive. Right? And it's almost like a chicken and the egg, right? Like who's to blame here? Is it because we're getting high scores, or because we're focused so much on trying to get high scores? And then is that actually just hurting ourselves, because now we keep raising the bar, and so now we have to score higher and higher and higher. Right? In 2015, College Board reported that 72% of Asian test takers in the previous academic year earned at least one score of 3, a passing score on the AP exam. So again, colleges are looking at just numbers, right? They have all these applications, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of applications. Yeah, we're going to have to use numbers to start making some quick decisions. And so when the standard, with the bar is set high, and who set that bar is going to be another discussion. But we do recognize that there is this bar. So this is what I want to show us. This is really interesting. 2016-2017 study. And this is all on one of the government websites, the census. So college enrollment rate. Asians have the highest college enrollment rate at 58%. 6-year graduation rate from college. Again, Asians have the highest, 74%. 8th graders with 0 absences within 30 days, the past 30 days. Asians, again, highest, 62%. Actually, I remember one time I threw up in the morning before school. I was feeling really sick. And then after I threw up, my mom said, "Oh, you're okay now, right? You can go to school," because you already threw up. Right? So we have to think about, is it, what kind of cultural differences it could be, attributing to these kind of statistics as well, right? What kind of emphasis, priority we put on academic and even things like attendance, right? So 0 absences within 30 days. Yeah, Asian 62% highest. At least 1 suspension from school. Asians are the lowest, 1.1%. Again, are there cultural differences here? Is it like we respect elders, we respect others? Is there more Asians are more polite or something? So something about more passive. So maybe not as many suspensions. Passed calculus during high school. Asians highest, 45%. Earned AP credits or IB credits in high school, Asians highest, 72%. Now, after college, median annual earnings with bachelor's or higher, right? Again, no surprise, Asians highest, $69,000, highest, 69.1. So we know there are high expectations for Asians. Colleges know this, and they have historical data. They have decades and decades of that data, and they can see the trends as well. So yeah, they know. Okay, they know that the expectations are high. And we are seeing more and more subjective admissions because when we take out standardized objective measurements, right? Lack of SAT and ACT scores on college applications is fast becoming the new normal. When you start taking away more and more objective measurements, we're left with the more subjective ones, right? It's making colleges even more subjective in decision making. And if we think about this for a second, really, what's left that's still objective? It's going to be GPA. It's going to be AP scores. Maybe that's it, right? If SAT and ACT scores are going optional or not required, if SAT 2 subject tests have already been canceled, then what we're left with is going to be GPA and AP scores. And then even then, there's another discussion on the table in terms of are grades inflated? Or, is a 4.0 at this high school the same as a 4.0 at a different high school? So we have to think about that as well, right? Like how hard the school is, the rigor, difficulty. And then even within the same school, you can have different teachers who, grade differently. So there are a lot of factors like that to consider. So yes, colleges, in short, seem to become more and more subjective in their decision-making. An admissions application, this is from a former officer, can be read, an application can be read in about 4 to 5 minutes. Right? They're trained to read very quickly. They know what to look for. Sometimes they're paid by how fast, how many applications they can read per hour. And a decision can be made in literally seconds, right? So first of all, you're trying to stand out so that you can even have the opportunity to impress your reader. So you got to stand out in order to do that in the first place, right? If you just seem, again, like another statistic, if you fall into the averages, if you fall into expectations and nothing more, maybe the reader won't even be impressed by what you have to say, especially if there isn't anything impressive to read about. The more selective the college, the more nitpicky they're going to be about the classes you take. Right. So these admissions officers, remember, they look at your course selection in terms of rigor, right, and selectivity. So this is if your school offers APs and honors and your student doesn't take them, right, that's kind of a minus against you. And then your grades as well. So if a lot of students, your peers, are taking the most challenging courses available and they're getting the highest scores possible, then, right, like that's kind of expected on you as well because you're from the same area. So technically you should be on par. And what happens if you live in a predominantly maybe Asian area? So again, for my example, I went to Lindbergh High School, 75% Asian. So basically 3 out of 4 people, if they do better than me, then I'm already heavily disadvantaged. Right. And that's something I also want to talk about. Something I want to remind us is, do we all want to follow the same path? Are we all trying to squeeze into the same hole? Right. Think about standing out in a different way then. Think about all the different things you could do. And especially since, we can be Asian American ethnically, nationally, right? But what if we're not quite there? This is something I talk to a lot of my students about is maybe they were born here or they moved here when they were very little, right? Maybe their interests or there's some sort of cultural mismatch or cultural misunderstanding between parents and children and in terms of how to encourage them, right? And even their love languages and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of psychology here when it comes to, interacting with children, teenagers, adolescents, right? This is all very, very important. All things that, especially I try to keep in mind when I'm talking to my students is trying to figure out, what do they really want though? Because we can tell our students, right, our children to do something, but if they don't really want to, or they don't understand why they're doing it, maybe they won't really care. There won't be that much effort. And this is actually, a big warning because this is kind of similar to what happened to me again. I wasn't really a math person, right? I wasn't really passionate about math. But guess what? Let's see, from my junior to senior year, right? My mom told me like, hey, I hear that you should be taking this math class because, all these other people are taking this math class. And it's like, I told her, I showed her my homework even, right? Like, I don't like math that much. I want to spend more time focused on my strengths, right? Like the things I'm actually interested in that I'm going to give more effort, put more effort. Long story short, right? I was kind of forced into taking this math class that I wasn't that interested in. It hurt my grades, it hurt my GPA, and therefore it overall hurt my chances of getting into college because it wasn't my strength. It wasn't my strength. When you force, force someone to follow a strength that's not their strength, there's a mismatch there. That could hurt them way more than just what we think, right? The face value, the base level here. So we have to really think about the consequences of our decisions, our the plan. So this is why I always tell students like, hey, when you choose your classes, choose them carefully. And luckily, I've been talking to more students even before they go to high school, so that we can really talk about, wait, these are the different paths that you can try taking. And if you're exploring your interest during ninth grade, for example, and you realize like, oh no, that's not really for me, great, right? Switch out and we'll go into somewhere else where you'll actually be engaged and you'll be motivated to try harder, right? And you'll be happy and you'll study because you want to learn the topic, and you'll do well and you'll stand out because you did well. Okay, so this is what I'm really trying to emphasize here is how to stand out. The first step is understanding who it is, the person. All right, so that's something that we want to talk to our students about is, yeah, what do you want to do? What are things you like? And I know that, sometimes teenagers are like, I don't know, or nothing, right? Or whatever, I don't care, right? But we don't want to stop there, of course, right? And there's always something else we can do to try to figure out, like, push it more. And I do have some students, some examples I'll share with you a little later tonight. All right, so standing out. So many times I ask students, so how do you think you're unique? How do you stand out? And they usually say, I don't think I am, right? I don't think I'm unique. My school is mostly Asian. I play a musical instrument just like everyone else. I do a sport just like everyone else. I go to volunteering just like everyone else, right? I do these things just like everyone else. Yeah, you're right. You do those things. But I always tell people that what makes you unique is the unique combination of what you do. That's usually the first thing that I try to go for. Right. So yeah, you probably are, like a lot of people like math, and not just Asians, right? Like maybe a lot of people do like math. A lot of people like this, like this, like this. But what are the different things you like? And what are the different life experiences, different perspectives that have been molded and shaped by your unique life experiences? And this is something common when it comes to summer application, essay writing, college essay writing. Tell us stories, tell us life stories that not many other people can say, that can, say that they've done as well. How many people have been to this event in this year and had your thoughts and your emotions during your unique experience of that, event? That's what we're going for when we say unique. So again, you don't have to be the standout in an applicant pool, right? You don't even have to be the best at what everyone else is doing. You just have to stand out in one area at least. Maybe a social skill, interpersonal skill, right? Public speaking, creating a unique form of art. Your uniqueness is not defined by your academics. And that's something I'll also talk about later is when you're Asian American, because you have such high expectations, right? We saw all those numbers. You have a lot of high expectations when it comes to numbers, grades, test scores and all that. If you're going to stand out that way, then you better be prepared to be at the very, very top of that mountain of numbers, right? You have to, that's the risk you're taking. If you're climbing that path that a lot of people have climbed before you, you better be prepared to be at the top of that path, or else you're not really going to stand out, because there's a large crowd there. Even if you do really, really well, right? It might still not be enough to stand out, is what I'm saying. So think about, we usually think about work smarter, not necessarily harder. So what are the ways to stand out, right? And again, this really, not just because you're Asian American, this is for everyone. Everyone can stand out like this. Course selection. Instead of taking the regular course selection that everyone else at your school is taking, right? What about more college level classes? So think about How many students are at your school? Maybe 2,000, maybe more. What percentage of those students are actually taking classes outside of your high school, right? How many of them are taking online courses? How many of them are taking community college courses? How many of them are taking specific summer courses, summer programs or whatnot, pre-college? That's what I mean by course selection. And what kind of classes are they taking? Okay. Extracurricular activities. So same thing, right? Yeah, maybe a lot of people do the same sports. Maybe, right? So maybe the way to stand out is to actually go beyond your school, right? Yes, you're doing sports at your school, but what if you join this other team that's outside of school? What if you join this other extracurricular activity that's, again, outside of school? So yes, there are clubs and programs, right? Every high school has a club. But what about the clubs that are more recognized locally, regionally, internationally even? Right, at least nationally, like FBLA. So we have these clubs that are, stronger in terms of what effect it has on your application with your involvement in it. But again, what about clubs outside of your high school? What about just local clubs? What about city clubs? Programs, same. Internships, work experience. Really, really ask yourself, how many of your classmates, right, have internships or work experience? How many are actually working? Answer, not really, not many, right? Not the majority. Major selection. Yeah, a lot of people are going to want to study CS, right? Or something math or something STEM. Make sure that it fits your profile though. We've seen this every year, right? Like maybe perfect grades, perfect test score, wants to study something CS, right? Or something science. Unfortunately, gets waitlisted or maybe rejected from some of the more competitive schools because it didn't match the profile. Because remember, colleges are looking at applications and applicants holistically, cohesion, right? Cohesively, like your entire high school career kind of prepares you for what you're going to do in the college and beyond. So if you don't have a lot of strength there in terms of evidence, right, strong evidence showing that you actually do like that subject because you've already done it throughout high school, then yeah, that's going to be really important. And then demonstrated interest. So on one hand, demonstrated interest in the major that you're going to choose, or we're also talking about in the school itself. Remember, there are some schools that care a lot about how much interest you put in their school, and that can come from college visits, that can come from any sort of college-sponsored official events, things like that. So making sure that you're engaged. I also, I've had students who they're trying to get through high school and get to college because of sports. So if that's something for you, then remember that you have to sell yourself. You have to really reach out to them, unless you're like the best something in the nation, right? Even like Division II, Division III, NCAA, right? If you're Division III, especially, you're gonna have to put yourself out there because they're not really gonna come looking for you. So that's another thing about demonstrated interest. I had a student, he basically wrote an email and he just reached out to all these D3 schools and they responded and they told them like, well, these are the times that we're looking for. And if you can get these times, then, email us again and we'll start talking. So yeah, you can demonstrate your interest. Something that a lot of people recommend is, getting in touch with the person who's the representative of your region for that college that you're applying to. So yeah, that is another something you can try. Okay, although, yeah, I mean, we can talk more about how to do that, but yeah, you gotta have a good reason, right, for contacting them first of all. And then college responses and essays. Remember, we talked about if we take out all these objective measures, what are we left with that's subjective then? Letters of recommendation, huge. I cannot underline how important letters of recommendation are. Colleges, they can take your word for it, right? As a student, they can take your word for whatever you've done and your growth, but then they can also see what an adult has to say. An adult who's been a teacher for a while, who's maybe been to, their college as a former student has to say. This is huge. Letters of recommendation. So if you don't really reach out and, you don't really talk to your teachers or your, faculty at your school, you're missing out. You're missing a huge part of the socialization in terms of academics. Your interaction with your faculty members during high school, that kind of reflects on how you're going to interact with your faculty in college. Colleges want college students who interact with faculty. So if you don't do that during high school, how do they expect you or trust that you will do the same in college? So this is huge. This is huge. I again can't stress that enough. Maybe there's this unfamiliarity. Maybe there's this maybe this cultural difference. Maybe something. I felt it the same way. I felt it when I was in high school. Like I thought, okay, maybe my teachers are up here. I'm just down here. Right? I'm just a student. But no, really, like that really hurts. But luckily for me, when I got into leadership, I was interacting with my teachers a bit more, and I was interacting with my vice principal because she was in charge of ASB. So it really, really helps to get like an adult perspective while we're in high school in terms of college from a teacher's perspective. That's great. But then the essays, right? So basically, how do you talk about yourself? How do you showcase yourself to the colleges in, again, just a few minutes, right? Because they're skimming through these very, very quickly. If the main essay is about something that is not mentioned anywhere else in the application, if it tells a new story, the admissions officer is going to be instantly more intrigued. I guarantee it, okay? So over the years, I've read a lot of drafts of essays, and I've met a lot of students. I can tell you this. There are students and there are drafts, right? When the first impression is I'm not impressed. And if I'm not impressed, and again, sample size, I can say 100%, I have not seen as many student applications as colleges have. If I'm not impressed, there's no way they're going to be impressed. No way. Okay. This is just the harsh reality, right? They've seen way more applications. They've seen way more students. I'm not impressed. They're not going to be impressed. There has to be something interesting. Again, this is getting more into essay writing strategy territory, but the general idea is these essays are nothing like academic essays that students we learn throughout high school. It's really, really not. I see a lot of major mistakes, and the first thing to keep in mind is the word count. You have to use the word count efficiently. It's about quality, not quantity, right? Especially myself guilty maybe. Teenagers are trained to write a lot of words because the teacher wants a minimum of how many words or how many pages, but we're going for a quantity at that point, right? These are really, really about quality. These admissions offices and officers, they can smell when you are just writing words for no reason. Okay, so don't do that. Okay, so the essays, I want to talk about this. Be yourself, right? Add in humor, add in personality. The best essays I've read and the essays that have helped students get into elite colleges and competitive colleges had humor, had personality. I could feel that this person is talking to me through the writing. Don't forget that writing is a form of language, just like speaking is. So if you are speaking to someone, you're thinking about what you're saying, how you're saying it, right? How they're going to take what you're saying. This is the same thing in writing. Writing is still like speaking. It's just written, and it's just one way, but you can still include yourself in terms of your voice in your writing. The least interesting essays I've read are the very academic sounding ones, right? And that's what I mean. Nothing like academic essays. If it sounds like a textbook, that's it. That's not right. That's already the wrong direction, because these are called personal statements. They need to be unique to you. They need to be unique to you as a person, not as a student necessarily, but as a person. So focus on your worldviews, your values, your perspectives. How did you become who you are today? Now, if you don't know, or you feel like you haven't really changed throughout high school, then maybe that's something that unfortunately is a little bit too late to change. Because think about this. If you didn't go outside of your comfort zones, if you didn't expand and explore, then you're right. You probably didn't have a lot of experiences to challenge your worldviews, right? Your values and perspectives. And in short, you probably didn't grow that much as you probably could have. And colleges are probably reading applications from students who have. So I just want to remind us again of me, what I did. Think about that first page. All those different things that I did throughout high school, I never planned to do any of those things. That's the secret. I never planned. For me, I was a bit naive. I went into 9th grade. I had an older sister, and she did marching band all 4 years. Because she did marching band, She was in drumline, right? And so she already knew people from marching band. And so, okay, I already knew some juniors and seniors, right, in marching band. And I already was playing drums. I enjoyed playing drums. Like, okay, this is fun, right? I'll join the drumline, I guess, right? I'll join marching band because my sister did it. And then after that, people were saying like, oh, hey, it'd be fun to play football, but football is the same time, right? Same season as marching band in the fall. So, you have to choose. And I was, okay, well, I already did marching band. Let's give it a try, right? Didn't have a plan. Let's go play football. Then I saw someone going around, right, getting signatures, running for class office. And I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds fun. I could probably get 25 signatures, right? Put my name on the ballot. Okay, long story short, vote runoff, and then, well, I accidentally become a class officer. Then I took my job very, very seriously. I was heavily involved in like homecoming and stuff, right? Planning. Actually, I did a lot more of the organization and kind of like traditional leadership stuff than the class president did. And I really enjoyed it. And then when it came to senior year, right, people were going around talking about like who's running for what. Usually the seniors run for ASB. So that's more for in charge of the whole school. So usually seniors aren't that interested in just senior class stuff. And so that meant there was one person running for senior class president, unopposed. Someone told me about it, and I really wasn't too interested. People were thinking, people were telling me like, oh, it's good for college, though. I was like, I don't really care, right? I don't want to do something just for college. I don't want to be that kind of like, waste my time in a sense. I'm not really into it. It would be unfair to myself also. But I thought about it some more, and then eventually like, yeah, I did, right? So long story short, actually all those things, work experience. My friend told me like, hey, there's this job fair. Are you interested? Sure. Why not? Let's go. All right. Volunteering. Hey, we're getting to go volunteer. You want to come? Sure. Why not? The idea is just to keep an open mind. You really have to keep an open mind in order to be accepting of opportunities that come into your life. When we try to plan everything out from beginning to the end, right, 9th grade to 12th grade, we could possibly miss out on some great opportunities along the way because we're trying to follow this rigid path. And the idea here is if we don't expand our worldviews and values and perspectives, and we don't have these opportunities to do so, and we minimize the opportunities to do so, we're minimizing the potential of our growth, of our maturity. And colleges recognize that. And again, I don't know if this is I don't have the statistics. I don't know if this is a cultural thing, but we do want to encourage our students, right, to reach out as much as possible, because just because our teenagers are Asian Americans, doesn't mean they're going to be traditionally Asian American in terms of stereotypes, in terms of their majors and whatnot. And again, like I said, I have some examples I want to share with you in a little bit. For the essays, avoid listing your achievements like a resume. You're already going to be listing your achievements and awards. Please don't write about them again, right? This is something I see often. Please don't write them again. If you're going to talk about them or something related to them, please focus on something else in terms of like maybe your emotions, your thought process, your decision making, stuff like that, instead of just, I did this, I won this, I did this, I won this. Like that's really, really boring to read. Share your thoughts and emotions. Have defined academic and career goals in your essays. This is technically a way to stand out, right? Because a lot of teenagers, they honestly probably aren't ready. We can think about when we were 17, 18, right? Like were we ready? Did we know 100% like this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? How many of us have switched jobs often or switched careers, right? Switched majors even in college. So it's going to be rough to expect someone to decide the rest of their life at 17. Impossible. But if you have a defined, at least for the meantime, for the short term, a defined goal in terms of academics and career, that's already an advantage. You're already standing out in that way. And what's more is if you can already work towards that goal, right? So one quick example is I have a student who's really interested in game design. He's right now 11th grade, I think. But I keep reminding him, right? Like if you want to do game design, that's creativity. You got to do it. You got to be creative now. You have to start making games or at least modding games right now, using CS, learn CS and mod games and design games right now. There are even a lot of games right now that have the ability, like workshops that can allow players to, you don't really have to know that much CS even. Like you can create your own game types and game modes. So if you want to, get into game design and the theory of balancing competitive games, especially online multiplayer games, you got to start now, because you can't just say that you like it and you want to do it, but you never actually did it when you had free time, right? You can see where from college's perspective, it doesn't really make sense. You tell us that you like this, but in your free time, you don't do it for fun. So evidence of active participation toward your goals. That is so important. All right, someone from Penn, a former Penn admissions officer. At Penn, we used to call it the student's bottom line. You would recommend an acceptance or a denial, and with that one sentence, you would say the reason why. Your bottom line on the student will contain the evidence to back your decision up. So it all boils down to one admissions officer with one sentence advocating for you. And you want to be able to convince that person that you're the right fit, you're the right student, you're the one that they're looking for. Okay, so I have a couple quick stories to share. I have a really, really wonderful example of a student. Really, really proud of her. Really proud of what she's done throughout high school, and really great news from her this past month or so. Okay, so quick info. She's a senior at a South Bay high school that is predominantly Asian. Her weighted GPA is not 4 or above. Didn't have a test score to report because of COVID and all that. She really, really enjoys art and game design through art, and really, really luckily, is I've known her for a while now, right? Like at least 2 years, and sometimes just we would talk about her interests, and she said like, oh, I play video games. Like, okay, cool. Like, do you ever want to maybe do art in video games? Like, okay, that could be interesting, right? And so after that, she got a little bit more into 3D design, digital art especially for video games. And then she, we would keep talking about this kind of stuff, and she said like, oh, well, my computer's really laggy, like I just have this laptop, like I can't really do much with it. I feel like I'm kind of limited with what I'm doing. And I was like, well, okay, well, what about this, right? So I suggested like, why don't you maybe try building a computer, build a more robust, right, stronger equipment and everything. Well, because I already had my experience with hardware, because I've built computers before, so I recommended her like some resources, where to look, and how to put these parts together. And she's like, well, no, I don't know, like I've never done that before. I've never used the Windows even before. I don't really know anything about hardware. It's like, it's okay, right? Like, let's try to I can give you some basic info. There's a lot of like YouTube videos you could watch. And I just kind of reassured her that it's like Lego, right? It's like technology Lego. You put these pieces together. So after some more recommendations, she's like, okay, right. And then so she put together a computer, and then she, it was crazy for her because she didn't know what she was doing in terms of putting hardware together, installing Windows for the first time, all this kind of stuff. But she did it, and she had this like immense feeling of success, right? And she was so happy that she was able to do it. And then this just unlocked this whole new level of potential for her, because now she could run, much more intense art programs. And she could do all these more, like design ideas that she had in her mind. And now she could do like 3D rigging, right? And all these things that she was limited by hardware before, right? Because I suggested to her to try to expand, go outside of what and try to just try it. Right? You won't know until you try it. I tell my students, I took this college level psych class during high school, because I thought I wanted to do psych. It was a night class. I went there once a week, and I decided I didn't like it, and then so I didn't major in psychology. Great. Sometimes when you try things, it's not just to hope that you will like it, right? It's also to help you figure out what you don't like. I ask students like, what do you want to study? I don't know. Well, what do you not want to study, right? What are the classes in school that you don't like, or that you don't think you'll do well in, right? That's a start. So for her, right, she really got into this, and with all this, she was she also had more of like she's very, very, very kind soul, and she loves to help people. And she was sharing this ability, this talent of hers through social media, through online platforms, and creating her own YouTube channel, Twitch channel. So this is so amazing. I'm so proud of her. And we talked so much about these kind of things in her essays, right? Nothing really about academics, nothing really about like achievements, major achievements, awards. And again, keep in mind her GPA and test scores, right? Like not the top of the list or anything like that. In fact, I think her high school ranking GPA wise, like, not top 25% even, and this is nothing on her. Like that's great. I think that's great, because that means she spent most of her time on her passion, and it definitely shows. And we wrote about all those things, and she got into a it was like top 35 school, you know, with this kind of stuff. And yeah, she's Asian American, right? Like, this is how she stood out as an Asian American, because she didn't try to fit in with everyone else. When the elevator is crowded, right, instead of trying to stuff yourself into the elevator, find a different path. Find a different path. I can tell you honestly, for me, because I was doing so many things throughout high school, I didn't have a lot of time to focus on grades. My GPA was not the highest, right? My test scores were not the greatest. I spent a lot of time committed to all those different activities and leadership roles that I had. I remember for Link Crew one time, so it's a tradition, right, for the incoming freshmen. If you're unfamiliar with Link Crew, the upperclassmen, the 11th graders and 12th graders, they welcome the 9th graders to school during the first week. And there's usually this big event to welcome the 9th graders, right? And the 11th and 12th graders, they usually pair up and they show a group of 9th graders around, a welcome tour and all that. I had this idea that, okay, let's make a bus. Let's make a bus for them to ride around in, right? So what I did was I took all this cardboard and I created a little bus with holes so that they could all wear this costume, basically. And when we put this all together, it looked like just their heads sticking out of this cardboard bus that I made that took, I think, a couple hours the night before, because this last minute idea. And then me and my partner, we were the crossing guards for this school bus that I created. And that was great because, that I think that got the 9th graders really involved. And these are the little things. These are the personal stories that we want our students to tell. If I'm telling you this story, I just told you a lot about my personality and my values, and I didn't have to tell you those out loud. I didn't have to literally tell you that I was creative. You could just figure that out from the story. So your essays are really important. If you have interviews, right, those are really, really important as well. So again, the takeaway is, how do you stand out? There's no set path, but it's your job and it's our responsibility to help you find that path. There is a path for everyone. That doesn't have to be the elevator that everyone's trying to squeeze into.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing with us your insights on the current situations of Asian American students. And that's all for tonight. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to join our WeChat group to receive our weekly articles and the webinar updates, please scan my WeChat code on the screen, and I will invite you to the group. And also feel free to contact me over phone calls or emails if you'd like to know more about our services. And hopefully we'll see you next Saturday, same time, 8 o'clock for the webinar. Thank you so much. Good night.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Daniel. Thank you.
Bye.